If you've ever had the feeling that something is missing in your backyard, you may want to consider installing a redwood deck. It's a fun job that provides many options and challenges for a weekend do-it-yourselfer. The deck we're building is 10 feet long and 12 feet wide. The first thing my assistant Roger Thayer and I do is measure and mark the spots where we will place our concrete footings.
Okay, good enough. Let's dig some holes.
This is the only part of the job I don't like, digging the holes for our concrete footings. There will be 3 in all.
How deep you need to dig your footings depends on where you live. For example, if you're in Minnesota, the frost line is 42 inches, so you have to go that deep or deeper depending on the local city code. Here in the South, 1 foot's going to be enough for this deck.
After digging the holes, we have to make sure our footings will be level with each other before we place the wooden forms for our concrete. One end of our deck will rest flat on the existing sidewalk, and we will need a fall of 1/2 inch from the sidewalk to the footings. We use a line level to even things up before we place our first form. We made the forms ourselves by simply nailing a few boards together into a 1-foot square. We secure our forms into place with a pair of wooden stakes. The reason we're using concrete footings instead of putting the wood frame into the ground is to help prevent moisture problems and problems with insects.
Yep, we'll have a 1/2 inch fall.
This job takes 2 bags of concrete to pour the 3 footings. After pouring and leveling our concrete, we let it set up overnight to dry.
Well, now that our concrete's dried, we're going to put down some plastic mesh to block any growth of weeds. We don't want weeds popping up between our boards once our deck is done. Spread this out. Put a few rocks on it to hold it down.
Now it's time to start building the frame for our deck. Again, it's a 10 by 12. Since our 12-foot studs are 1.5 inch thick, we cut 3 inches off of our 10-foot studs, 1.5 inches on each end, to make it square. A nail gun certainly comes in handy here, but you can always use a hammer.
When you first set your frame up on your footings, you need to check 2 things. 1, is it still level? Does it fall the way that you intended? And number 2, is it square? And there's a very simple formula to figure out whether it's square or not. Now, if you paid attention in geometry, you can make a right triangle on any corner, and a squared plus b squared equals the hypotenuse squared. If you didn't remember that and don't want to work on it, just mark off 4 feet in one direction, and then 3 feet in the other direction. Now, if you measure from those 2 points and they're 5 feet apart, then you are square. If they're more than that, you need to bring in one side, or if they're less than that, you need to kick the side out. How do we look, Roger?
We're off about 3/8. Oh.
Other direction?
No, yeah, go the other way. Oh.
How do we look?
Just right there.
Okay. Now our frame is square. We're ready to put in some other boards. All right. Let's measure across where we're going to put our support boards in the frame. You can space them different lengths. We're going to put ours every 1 foot. Okay. Well, we could just lay our boards across the top, just side by side, but that'd be too easy. We're going to do it a harder way. What we're going to do is lay them at an angle. Should look a lot nicer to the eye once we get it done here. We're going to pop a chalk line so we make sure that we get our board straight. Ready, Roger?
Yep.
Okay. Now when we put our first board down, we need to find the center of our line. And we're also going to have to cut the board in the middle of a joist because we can't have it just hanging out in the air. It wouldn't have any strength. Instead of nailing the floorboards in place, we're going to screw them in place. A deck screw has a special coating on it so that it doesn't rust, and a screw will hold the boards down. If you use nails, the boards can move up and down and squeak. You don't want that on a brand new deck. When you're cutting your boards to fit your deck together, offset the seams. Here's our first board that we did, the seams over here. But instead of cutting the next board on that same spot, we came over here to cut it. And then on the next board, we come back in over here, and then on that last one, back out again. That way our seams don't line up. It looks better, plus it's actually stronger if we mix them back and forth every other board. Now before you screw the other boards in place, you need to space them out from your main board and keep the same space all the way across your deck so it looks good. Now if you put them too far apart and you had a party, someone might get a heel stuck in between the boards. You don't want that. But if you put them too close to each other, when they expand and contract, the wood moving back and forth, they can actually curl up. You don't want that either. A good way to space them is just put a nail in between the boards and then come back and screw the boards in place. Well, we have just a few more boards to put on the corner. And instead of cutting every board exactly straight as you put them in place, it's a lot easier if you just run them up to the edge and then pop a chalk line and cut them all off at one time. You okay?
Yep, looks good.
All right, let's saw those off. Well, our last board is mounted. Now all we need to do to finish off our deck is add a band like we've started back here, all the way around the perimeter. That way we'll lose this rough edge, plus we won't chip it off when we're walking right on the very edge of the deck. Wherever you have two pieces come together on the band, it's best to cut at a 45-degree angle instead of a 90-degree angle. That way you really can't see the seams after you put it in place. Well, our sun deck is now complete. It looks great, feels great. It doesn't take very long to build. We spent a weekend on it, one day to do the footings and the next day to actually build it if you have a helper.
When your new house returns, we'll put a railing around that deck we just built. Today we're going to install railing around a redwood deck with a simple contemporary design that any do-it-yourselfer can build in an afternoon. We'll take you through every step, including cutting, notching, and mounting the posts that will support our railing, to cutting the spindles and measuring the distance between them on our base and top boards. And we'll top it off with some decorative trim work.
The most important thing to remember when you build railing, wear a purple shirt. It doesn't work any other way. You got to wear purple. And the first step is actually to measure. So let's pull a tape, Roger, and see how we're going to go on this one.
Go right even with the sidewalk there.
Yeah. Okay, we'll line up here. We're going to leave this open so we can walk up. All right, what have you got there, Roger?
99.5.
Okay, we're going to have 3 posts, one on each end, and then we're going to need one in the middle. So mark that. All right, post will be 3.5 inches, so we want to split that. Draw each edge of the post so we know where it's going to go. Well, the first thing we need to do is cut 3 posts so we can build our railing in between them. Let's see, we're going to have 3 feet exposed. How much do you want below the deck?
5.5 inches.
Okay, so 36 plus 5.5 is 41.5. So let's cut it right there.
Okay.
You need to draw your line on all 4 sides of the post because the saw blade's not going to cut through the full 3.5 inches. We're going to have to turn the post over to get all the way through it. So go ahead and draw your line with the square all the way around the post. All right, let's cut it. We're going to use an ordinary circular saw to cut this post. We're actually going to cut a piece for our post in the floorboards here. I've removed this one just so you can see how we're going to end up notching the bottom 5.5 inches of the post and then setting it down like that. That way we can run screws into it and it'll be sturdy. Roger's marking this post to cut half of the width off of it for a 5.5 inch section.
5.5 inches it stays will be up against the frame. The other 5.5 inches he's about to cut out right now. That very last piece you got to cut out with the hand saw because circular saw just can't reach that area. Earlier in the show we used deck screws instead of nails to put the boards down. As you can see, they come in handy for a lot of reasons. Besides not squeaking, also you can pull a board up if you need to cut a piece out for your post. To cut this deck, Roger's just using an ordinary jigsaw.
Try that.
Okay.
You want them tight.
Yep. Okay, before we put the screws in, we need to make sure that it's level. Okay. We're using 3-inch screws so we can reach through, get into the post.
45 3/8. 45 3/8.
Good. We're actually going to be square. After you secure your post and level them up, take a measurement at the bottom and at the top before you start cutting your railing. Then come on over and cut your board, your bottom board and your top board at the same time. Now we need to calculate exactly how many spindles we're going to need by measuring them out. How far do you want to separate them, Roger?
We'll go 5.5 inches.
Okay.
Easy way to do it is put them right together.
Yeah. 45 3/8.
22 5/8 would be center.
Okay. Depending on how long your railing is, you're just going to have to work with it and figure out how far apart you'd like to space your spindles. Our spindles are 1.5 inches wide. So, Roger, how far do you want to go between ours?
5.5.
Okay. So
I think it'll come out just about right.
take that over to, we're going to cut our spindles out of a 2x6. And like I said earlier, we're going to cut them 1.5 inches wide. So since dimensional lumber is not actually 6 inches wide, it's 5.5. We'll get about 3 spindles out of this board. Now you need to find your center point and put a spindle in each end and in the center, and then recheck all of your measurements to make sure that you've lined them up correctly where they're going to look good. Okay. Got it. Okay, well let's measure them off and put in the rest of them. We cut off some short pieces of 2x4 that we're going to place underneath our railing. This will hold it up off the deck. That way we can wash off our deck and the water will still drain without any problem. Okay. How do we look, Roger?
Good.
Okay. Ready to attach it?
Great.
Okay. Well, we're not going to leave our railing and posts the way they look now. We've got a bunch of screw heads that I want to cover up, so I've got a little strip of wood that I'll put on with just finishing nails. And then Roger's going to make some decorative caps to go on the end of our post, cover them up as well. Well, that's really all there is to building railing around a deck. It's not expensive and it's definitely something you can do. We've got this open area where we still need to build some more railing, or we can build a bench or even a lounger. That's the great thing about building your own deck. You can build it to suit your taste.